A humble caregiver begins working in a mansion where dangerous secrets are hidden beneath refined appearances. Soon, she uncovers a dark scheme involving inheritance, manipulation, and silent attempts to silence the elderly woman she was meant to protect. And when the truth threatens to surface, the house becomes a battlefield where courage and corruption collide. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. The wrought iron gate groaned heavily as Lucy Miller stepped through the mansion's entrance. Her brown eyes scanned the imposing three-story facade, clad in Portland stone and surrounded by impeccable gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was a Tuesday in March in London, in the affluent neighborhood of Belgravia, and the afternoon sun cast long shadows over the stone path leading to the main door. Lucy clutched her worn fabric bag tightly, feeling the weight of the responsibility she had just accepted. At 42, she knew well the meaning of hard work. She had raised 3 children alone after separating from her husband, juggling jobs as a cleaner, ironer, and cook in different family homes. This opportunity, however, was different. A caregiver for an elderly lady with a fixed salary and the possibility of regular days off. It seemed too good to be true. The solid mahogany door opened even before Lucy touched the doorbell. A tall, elegant woman, appearing to be around 50, emerged in the doorway. Her dark hair was pulled back in an impeccable bun, and she wore a beige tailored suit that probably cost more than Lucy earned in 6 months. The woman's eyes were cold as polished stones, scanning Lucy from head to toe in a silent, cruel assessment. "You must be the new caregiver," the woman said, without any warmth in her voice. "I am Veronica Davis, the administrator of this property. Come in." Lucy swallowed hard and stepped across the threshold. The mansion's interior was even more impressive than its exterior. The entrance hall had a double-height ceiling with an immense crystal chandelier hanging from above. The white marble floor reflected the light like a mirror, and a curved staircase of noble wood led to the second floor. Gold-framed paintings adorned the walls, family portraits and European landscapes that Lucy couldn't identify. "Let's establish the rules right away," Veronica continued, walking with firm steps down the corridor. Her heels echoed on the marble like small hammers. "You have been hired exclusively to care for Mrs. Helen. Your hours are Monday to Saturday from 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening. You must not touch anything that is not necessary for the performance of your duties. You must not ask questions about family matters. And above all, you must not bother anyone with unnecessary conversations." Lucy merely nodded, feeling a tightness in her chest. There was something in Veronica's manner of speaking that made her uncomfortable, a coolness that went beyond the formality expected in a wealthy household. It was as if every word was carefully chosen to establish an insurmountable distance. They ascended the staircase to the second floor, walking down a corridor decorated with more paintings and antique furniture. Veronica stopped before a double light wood door and knocked lightly before turning the handle. "Mrs. Helen, I've brought the new caregiver," Veronica announced, her voice taking on a slightly softer tone, yet still devoid of genuine cordiality. The room was spacious and bathed in the golden afternoon light, streaming through the wide windows. Period furniture filled the space, a 4-poster bed, ornate chests of drawers, upholstered armchairs, and there, sitting in a chair by the window, was the frailest person Lucy had ever seen. Mrs. Helen must have been over 80, her thin body almost disappearing beneath a light blue silk dressing gown. Her white hair was meticulously combed, and her blue eyes, though surrounded by deep wrinkles, shone with surprising lucidity. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Helen," Lucy said, approaching carefully. "I'm Lucy Miller. I'll be looking after you from today." Helen's blue eyes fixed on Lucy with intensity. The elderly woman extended a trembling hand, which Lucy held gently. Her fingers were thin as twigs, the skin almost transparent, revealing bluish veins beneath. "Lucy?" Helen repeated, her voice faint but clear. "What a beautiful name. It means light, doesn't it?" "Yes, ma'am," Lucy replied, feeling inexplicably moved by the elderly woman's gentle tone. Veronica cleared her throat behind them. "Lucy, I'll show you where the medications are and their schedules. Mrs. Helen takes medicine 3 times a day, at 8 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 8 at night. It is crucial that there are no delays. Her health is very delicate. For the next 20 minutes, Veronica led Lucy through a series of mechanical and detailed instructions. She showed her a locked cabinet in the bathroom adjacent to the bedroom, where various bottles of medication were stored. She explained Helen's daily routine, which included a morning bath, short walks down, the corridor, light meals and rest periods. Everything was timed with military precision, leaving no room for improvisation or flexibility. "Any change in Mrs. Helen's health must be immediately reported to me," Veronica said, handing Lucy a small golden key. "This is the key to the medicine cabinet. Don't lose it, and don't allow anyone else to access it." "May I ask something?" Lucy ventured, seeing an opportunity when Veronica paused. "Do you live here too?" Veronica stared at her with an expression Lucy couldn't quite decipher, a mixture of irritation and something darker. "Yes, I am the widow of Mrs. Helen's eldest son. After my husband's passing, I took over the administration of the family businesses and this property. Mrs. Helen is no longer able to manage her own affairs." There was something in the way Veronica pronounced the last words that sent a shiver down Lucy's spine. It was as if she was speaking of an object to be managed, not a person. When Veronica finally left the room, leaving Lucy alone with Helen, the elderly woman let out a long, trembling sigh. "You seem like a good young woman," Helen said, her voice low. "May I ask a favor?" "Of course, Mrs. Helen." Helen's blue eyes filled with an urgency Lucy hadn't expected. "Never leave me alone with her, please. Never." Lucy felt a chill run down her spine. "With whom, Mrs. Helen?" "With Veronica," the elderly woman whispered, looking at the closed door as if she feared it might open at any moment. "Don't trust her. Don't trust anything she says." Before Lucy could respond, the door opened again, and a young woman entered, smiling. She must have been about 28, with long brown hair and light eyes. She wore jeans and a simple blouse, completely unlike Veronica's formality. "Grandma, I came to see how you are," the young woman said, approaching and kissing Helen's forehead with genuine affection. Then she turned to Lucy. "Hi, you must be the new caregiver. I'm Mary, Grandma Helen's granddaughter. Welcome." The difference between Mary's warmth and Veronica's coldness was striking. Lucy immediately felt more at ease. "Nice to meet you, Mary. I'm Lucy." The three chatted for a few minutes. Mary asked about Lucy's family, showing sincere interest when she mentioned her 3 children. Helen smiled, seeming more animated by her granddaughter's presence. But when Veronica appeared at the door again, the atmosphere changed instantly. "Mary, I need to speak with you now," Veronica said, her tone brooking no argument. Mary cast an apologetic glance at her grandmother and left, following Veronica down the corridor. Lucy could hear the start of a whispered argument outside, though she couldn't distinguish the words. "She's always been like this," Helen murmured, closing her eyes tiredly. "Controlling. Ambitious. Ever since she married my son Robert, she wanted to run everything. And now that he's gone, she acts as if this house, this family, everything belongs to her." "Mrs. Helen, you should rest," Lucy said, adjusting the pillows. But Helen grasped her wrist with surprising strength. "Listen to me carefully, Lucy. Be careful. There are things happening in this house that you don't understand yet. Dangerous things. Veronica wants something from me, and she won't stop until she gets it." Lucy felt her heart race. "What do you mean, Ma'am?" Before Helen could answer, Veronica returned to the room, carrying a teacup on a silver tray. "Mrs. Helen, I've brought your tea," she said, placing the cup on the small table beside the armchair. "You need to take your medicine." Lucy watched Veronica prepare. 3 different pills, arranging them in a small porcelain bowl. There was something mechanized and cold in her movements, as if she were performing a repetitive and unpleasant task. As Helen took the medication, Lucy noticed how the elderly woman's hands trembled more than before. And for the first time since she had entered that imposing mansion, she wondered what kind of situation she had truly gotten herself into, and if this job, which seemed like a blessing, was not, in fact, the beginning of something far more complicated and darker than she could ever imagine, something that was only just beginning to reveal its hidden layers of secrets and tensions. Lucy's first days at the mansion passed in a rigid and silent routine. She arrived promptly at 7 in the morning, politely greeted the other staff, went directly to Mrs. Helen's room, and began the morning care. Bath, medication, a light breakfast served on a silver tray, a short walk down the wide corridor. Everything was timed, everything under the watchful eye that Lucy felt, even when Veronica wasn't physically present. It was as if the walls had eyes, as if every movement was observed and judged. On the Thursday of her first week, while helping Helen get dressed, Lucy noticed something strange. The elderly woman, normally lucid in the morning, seemed confused and drowsy, her responses slow and slurred. "Mrs. Helen, did you sleep well?" Lucy asked, concerned. "I don't know," Helen murmured, leaning heavily on Lucy's arm. "I feel like I'm swimming in a fog. It happens more and more." Lucy frowned. "Perhaps we should call a doctor." "No," Helen said with sudden firmness, grasping Lucy's wrist. "Don't call anyone, especially don't let Veronica know we're talking about this." Before Lucy could insist, they heard firm footsteps in the corridor. Veronica entered without knocking, carrying a brown leather folder under her arm. "Good morning," she said, her tone formal as ever. "Mrs. Helen, this afternoon Dr. Peterson will come for your routine checkup." Helen seemed to shrink in her chair. "No need. I'm fine." "It's not a matter of choice," Veronica replied, her voice taking on a steely hardness. "The doctor needs to assess your condition. Furthermore, we have important matters to discuss, legal matters that can no longer be postponed." Lucy noticed the panic in Helen's eyes, but the elderly woman said nothing, merely lowered her head in resignation. That afternoon, Lucy was helping Helen with her tea when a middle-aged man arrived. He wore a grey suit and carried a black briefcase. Dr. Peterson had a professional smile and courteous manners, but his eyes were cold and calculating. He examined Helen quickly, asking basic questions about her sleep, appetite, and pains. "Her health is fragile," he said to Veronica, as if Helen weren't present. "Previous tests already indicated progressive cognitive decline. It would be prudent to consider asset protection measures." Veronica nodded, satisfied. "That's exactly what I thought. I've already prepared some documents." Lucy felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't fully understand legal terms, but there was something profoundly wrong with that conversation, in the way they spoke about Helen as if she were a problem to be solved, not a person to be cared for. When the doctor left, Veronica remained in the room. She opened her folder and took out several papers. "Mrs. Helen, we need to update your will," she said, placing the documents on the table. "The laws have changed, and there are tax issues that need to be adjusted. We also need to establish a power of attorney so I can manage your affairs more efficiently." "I don't want to change anything," Helen said, her voice trembling but determined. Veronica's face hardened. "You don't have a choice. Your health is worsening. The doctor himself confirmed it. If we don't take these steps now, everything could become complicated later. You don't want to create problems for Mary, do you?" The mention of her granddaughter made Helen waver. Lucy saw doubt cross the elderly woman's face. "I'll think about it," Helen finally murmured. Veronica put the papers away with an abrupt movement. "Don't take too long. The solicitor has already been consulted and is waiting." When Veronica left, Helen began to cry silently. Lucy knelt beside her, holding her frail hands. "Mrs. Helen, what's happening?" "She wants everything," the elderly woman whispered. "The house, the company, the money, everything Robert built. She always wanted it. And now she uses my own weakness against me. But you don't have to sign anything you don't want to." Helen laughed bitterly. "You don't understand. She has ways of getting what she wants. Always has. When Robert was alive, she convinced him of everything. She alienated my son from me, turned him into someone I barely recognized. And now that he's gone, she wants to erase what's left of his family." That night, as Lucy was about to leave, she found Mary in the corridor. The young woman seemed distraught. "Lucy, can I speak with you for a minute?" she asked, looking around to ensure they were alone. "Of course." Mary led her to a small office on the ground floor, closing the door behind them. "How is my grandmother really?" Lucy hesitated. She didn't want to create conflict, But there was something in Mary's sincerity that made her trust her. "She's scared," Lucy said. "Veronica is pressuring her to sign documents." Mary closed her eyes, seeming to confirm something she already suspected. "I knew it. Veronica has been acting strangely for months. Secret meetings with solicitors, phone calls she cuts short when someone approaches. And my grandmother has been getting more and more confused, weaker." "The medicines," Lucy said impulsively. "Do you think they might be making her like this?" Mary stared at her, surprised. "You noticed it too. I thought I was being paranoid." Before they could continue, they heard footsteps. Mary quickly opened the door and found Veronica on the other side, clearly listening to the conversation. "Mary, what an interesting meeting," Veronica said, her tone icy. "I suppose you're conspiring against me." "Don't be ridiculous," Mary replied, firmness in her voice. "We were just discussing Grandma's care." Veronica looked from Mary to Lucy, her eyes narrowing. "Lucy, your job here is to care for Mrs. Helen, not to get involved in family matters. I suggest you stick to that, unless you want to look for another job." Lucy's heart pounded. She desperately needed that job. She couldn't risk losing it. But at the same time, she saw the silent plea for help in Mary's eyes. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Veronica," she murmured, lowering her eyes. "Good. Now go home. It's past your time." Lucy left the mansion with a heavy heart. On the crowded bus that took her back to the East End, where she lived in a small rented house with her 3 children, she couldn't stop thinking about Helen. The elderly woman's frailty, the fear in her eyes, the feeling of being trapped in a hopeless situation. At home, while preparing dinner for her children, her cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" "Lucy, it's Mary. I got your number from the agency. Sorry to call outside of hours, but I need your help." Lucy looked at her children eating at the table, at the peeling walls of her humble home, and thought about how much that job meant to them. But then she thought of Helen, alone and frightened in that enormous mansion. "What do you need?" "I want you to observe everything. Write down the medicines my grandmother takes when Veronica talks to her about documents, anything strange. Can you do that?" Lucy took a deep breath. "I can, but I have to be careful." "I understand. Thank you, Lucy. You don't know how much this means." When she hung up, Lucy felt the weight of responsibility fall upon her shoulders. She didn't know exactly what she was getting into, but one thing was certain. Life in that mansion was far more complicated and dangerous than it appeared, and the secrets buried within those stone walls were only just beginning to surface, bringing with them consequences that Lucy could barely imagine in that quiet moment in her modest kitchen, as night fell over London and the future remained uncertain and threatening before her. Over the next 2 weeks, Lucy became a silent and meticulous observer. She began carrying a small notebook hidden in her uniform pocket, jotting down every detail that seemed strange to her. The times Helen became particularly confused, always half an hour after taking certain medications. The frequent visits of a man in a suit, whom Veronica always received in the ground floor office. Conversations that ended abruptly when someone approached. The phone calls Veronica took in the garden, pacing nervously among the rose bushes as she spoke in a low voice. One April morning, while organizing Helen's medicine cabinet, Lucy decided to photograph the bottles with her old cell phone. She did it quickly with trembling hands, fearing at any moment to hear footsteps in the corridor. There were 6 different bottles, all with complicated names she could barely pronounce. She sent the photos to Mary, who replied a few hours later saying she would show them to a trusted doctor. Helen was having a particularly difficult day. She could barely keep her eyes open. Her speech was slurred and confused. Lucy helped her lie down in bed after lunch, covering her with a light sheet. "Lucy," Helen murmured, holding her hand with surprising strength for someone so frail. "Don't let her win, please." "I won't, Mrs. Helen, I promise." That afternoon, Veronica appeared in the room with the man in the suit whom Lucy had seen before. He was tall, about 50, with grey hair combed back and an expression that tried to seem cordial but failed completely. "Lucy, this is Dr. Andrew Stone, our solicitor," Veronica introduced. "He has come to discuss some legal matters with Mrs. Helen." She's very tired today, Lucy said, instinctively placing herself between them and the bed where Helen was dozing. Perhaps it would be better to come back another day. Veronica stared at her with a coldness that made Lucy take a step back. We didn't ask for your opinion. Wait outside. Lucy looked at Helen, who briefly opened her eyes, a silent plea in her gaze, but Lucy had no choice but to obey. She left the room but didn't go far. She stood in the corridor, near the half-open door, trying to listen to the conversation. Fragments reached her. The solicitor's voice, speaking in technical terms, transfer of assets, irrevocable power of attorney, special clauses. Helen's voice, weak and confused, trying to resist but clearly without strength. And Veronica insistent, her voice taking on a tone of false sweetness that made Lucy feel nauseous. You trust me, don't you, Mrs. Helen? I've always taken care of everything. I'm just trying to protect the family's assets, protect Robert's legacy. You want that, don't you? After 40 minutes, the solicitor and Veronica left. Lucy quickly returned to the room and found Helen crying silently. What happened? She wants me to sign next week. She said the notary public will come, that it's just a formality. Are you going to sign, Ma'am? Helen closed her eyes. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm so tired, Lucy, so tired. That night, Lucy could barely sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, thinking of Helen, of Mary, of the whole situation that seemed to be slipping out of her control. At 3 a.m, she decided she needed to do something more concrete. She needed real proof. The following Tuesday, when everyone believed she had left, Lucy stealthily returned to the mansion. She used the key she had for the back gate, the one meant for staff, and entered silently. The house was plunged into darkness. Only a few security lights faintly illuminated the corridors. Her heart pounded so hard she feared the sound might wake someone. She descended the stairs with extreme care, avoiding the steps she knew creaked. On the ground floor, she walked to the office Veronica used, a spacious room with bookshelves and an imposing mahogany desk. The door was locked. Lucy felt a moment of frustration, but then remembered something she had seen. Veronica kept an extra key in a decorative vase near the door. With trembling hands, Lucy searched and found the small silver key. The office smelled of polished wood and expensive perfume. Lucy turned on her cell phone's flashlight, keeping the beam low. She began to examine the papers on the desk. There were bank correspondences, statements showing high-value transfers to accounts Lucy didn't recognize, legal documents with law firm letterheads. And then she found it, a brown leather folder, the same one Veronica always carried. Inside it, a document titled New Will and General and Irrevocable Power of Attorney. Lucy began to read, her understanding limited by the complicated legal terms, but some things became painfully clear. The document transferred total control of all of Helen's assets to Veronica, the family business, the mansion, bank accounts, investments, everything. Lucy photographed each page, her hands trembling so much that she needed to make several attempts to get clear images. Then she heard voices. Her blood ran cold. The voices came from the corridor, approaching. Lucy recognized Veronica's voice and that of the solicitor, Andrew Stone. We can't wait much longer, Andrew was saying. The banks are asking questions. We need that signature as soon as possible. She'll sign, Veronica replied with cruel confidence. I increased the dosage of the medications as you suggested. By Friday, she'll be docile enough. Fury burned in Lucy's chest, so her suspicions were correct. They were using medicine to make Helen confused and manipulable. The voices were getting closer and closer. In a panic, Lucy looked for a place to hide. She saw a side door in the office that led to a small filing cabinet. She squeezed inside, carefully closing the door. Through a small crack, she could see Veronica and Andrew enter the office. Veronica switched on the desk lamp. I need to show you something, she said, walking to a bookshelf and pressing a hidden mechanism. A section of the shelf slid aside, revealing a secret compartment. Lucy watched, barely able to breathe. Inside the compartment were more documents, stacks of money, and what appeared to be a digital memory stick, a small USB drive. Here are the transfers, Veronica said, picking up some papers. $2 million have already been moved to the account in Miami. Another 3 million will be transferred once we have the power of attorney signed. Andrew nodded, examining the documents. And what about the granddaughter, Mary? She could cause problems. Veronica laughed, a cold, humorless sound. Mary is naive. By the time she realizes what's happened, it will be too late. Besides, she has no proof of anything. They continued talking for another 20 minutes, discussing sordid details of their plan. Lucy photographed everything she could through the crack, including the open secret compartment. Finally, they left. Lucy waited another 15 interminable minutes before daring to move. When she came out of the cabinet, her legs barely supported her. She left the office, locked the door, returned the key to the vase, and fled the mansion as if she were being chased by ghosts. The next day, Lucy showed everything to Mary, in a cafe far from the mansion. The young woman paled when she saw the photos. "This is much worse than I imagined," she whispered. "We need to act fast. The signing is scheduled for Friday." "What can we do?" Lucy asked. Mary took a deep breath. "I have a trusted solicitor. I'll show this to him today. And we need to protect my grandmother. Lucy, can you make sure she doesn't take all those medicines?" Lucy nodded, though she knew the risk she was taking. "If I'm going to do this, I need to be sure we can stop her." Mary held Lucy's hands. "We will. I won't let Veronica destroy my family." As she returned to the mansion that afternoon, Lucy felt a mixture of fear and determination. She knew the coming days would be crucial, that every move would need to be carefully calculated, because Veronica was not only ambitious and cruel, but intelligent and powerful, and she wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone who stood in her way, including a simple caregiver who dared to challenge her plans. Friday dawned with a cloudy sky over London. Lucy arrived at the mansion with her stomach churning with nervousness. She knew this would be the decisive day, the moment when everything could either go right or completely fall apart. She had the evidence on her phone, copies saved in 3 different places as Mary had instructed. But more importantly, she had a plan. When she went up to Helen's room, she found the elderly woman still in bed, looking frailer than ever. Her blue eyes, however, had a different sparkle that morning, less confusion, more awareness. "Good morning, Mrs. Helen," Lucy said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Scared," Helen admitted. "Today's the day, isn't it?" Lucy looked at the closed door and approached, lowering her voice. "Listen carefully, trust me. I'm going to help you, but you need to do exactly what I say." She then began to explain the plan in quick whispers. Over the past 3 days, Lucy had secretly reduced the dosage of the medications that made Helen drowsy, replacing some of the pills with harmless vitamins she had bought at the chemist. Helen was more lucid now, her thoughts clearer. Throughout the morning, the mansion was abuzz with unusual activity. Staff cleaned and organized the ground floor meeting room. Veronica circulated through the corridors with a satisfied expression, wearing a navy blue tailored suit that gave her an air of corporate authority. At 2 in the afternoon, the guests began to arrive. The solicitor, Andrew Stone, was the first, carrying a leather briefcase and a professional expression. Then came the notary public, an elderly man with thick glasses and a stooped posture, who seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. Mary arrived shortly after, giving Lucy a meaningful glance. The meeting room was prepared as if for a solemn ceremony. A polished mahogany table occupied the center, surrounded by upholstered chairs. On the table, the documents were, arranged in perfect order, silver pens beside them, everything precisely intimidating. Lucy helped Helen descend the stairs. The elderly woman walked slowly, leaning on her cane, each step a small victory. When they entered the room, the silence was broken only by the muffled sound of footsteps. "Mrs. Helen, how good that you've arrived," Veronica said, her tone falsely cordial. "Please, sit here." She indicated the main chair, positioned facing the documents. Helen sat down slowly, her hands trembling slightly on her cane. The notary public cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "Well, let's begin. I need to confirm that you, Helen Davis, are here of your own free will and in full use of your mental faculties." There was a pause. Lucy, standing behind Helen's chair, held her breath. "Yes," Helen said, her voice surprisingly firm. Andrew Stone began to explain the documents, using complicated legal terms clearly intended to confuse. He spoke of transfers of administration, special powers, asset protection clauses. Veronica observed everything with a satisfied expression, occasionally nodding as if to encourage Helen. Mary, sitting on the other side of the table, was visibly tense. Her fingers drummed nervously on the polished surface. Then the notary public placed the first page before Helen, pointing to the line where she was supposed to sign. Out of the corner of her eye, Lucy saw Veronica lean slightly forward, anticipation in every muscle of her body. Helen picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the paper for a moment that seemed to stretch indefinitely, and then Lucy acted. "Wait!" Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. All eyes turned to her. Lucy could feel her heart pounding in her chest, but she forced herself to continue. "Mrs. Helen should not sign these documents." Veronica rose, abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "How dare you? Who do you think you are to interrupt this?" "I am someone who saw what you are doing," Lucy replied, her voice gaining strength. "And I have proof." The silence that followed was so dense it seemed palpable. Andrew Stone paled. The notary public frowned, confused. Mary stood up too, positioning herself beside Lucy. "What proof?" Veronica demanded, but there was a tremor in her voice that hadn't been there before. Lucy took her cell phone from her pocket, her hands now steady. "Photos of the two of you conspiring. In the office. Recordings of your conversations about increasing Mrs. Helen's medication dosage to make her confused. Documents showing illegal money transfers. Everything." Andrew Stone suddenly stood up. "This is absurd. You're making it up." But his voice faltered, his expression betraying his panic. Mary stepped forward. "She's not making it up. My solicitor has already reviewed everything. These transfers are fraudulent. The power of attorney is illegal because it was obtained under duress. And the medicines," she looked at Veronica with repulsion, "you were doping my grandmother." Veronica looked from Lucy to Mary, her composure finally beginning to crack. "You don't understand. I'm protecting the assets. Helen is not in a condition to manage anything. Someone needs to make the decisions." "Someone like you," Helen said, her voice weak but clear. "Someone who wants to steal everything Robert built." "I'm not stealing," Veronica shouted, completely losing control. "I worked for this family. I dedicated my life. I deserve this." The notary public stood up, putting away his materials. "I'm sorry, but I cannot proceed with this ceremony. There are clear irregularities here." Andrew Stone tried to salvage the situation. "Mr. Notary Public, these are unfounded accusations from disgruntled employees. Please don't—" But the notary public was already leaving, clearly wanting to distance himself from any legal trouble. Mary approached Andrew. "You have two options. Either you admit your involvement and testify against her, or I will ensure you are held accountable as an accomplice in all the lawsuits I will file." Andrew looked at Veronica, who glared at him with fury, then at Mary. Lucy could see the calculation happening in his mind, weighing loyalty against self-preservation. "She hired me," he said finally, his voice defeated. "She asked me to prepare documents that would give her total control. She suggested increasing the medications. She organized the transfers. I merely followed instructions." Veronica spun towards him, betrayal etched on her face. "How dare you?" "I'm doing what I need to protect myself," Andrew replied, picking up his briefcase and walking towards the door. Veronica stood alone in the center of the room, all eyes fixed on her. For a moment, she seemed smaller, her aura of authority dissolving. Then, with a sudden movement, she grabbed a glass of water from the table and approached Helen. "Drink, Mrs. Helen, your medicine." "No," Lucy cried, but Veronica was faster, pressing the glass against Helen's lips. The elderly woman drank a few sips before Mary managed to push Veronica's arm away, the glass falling and shattering on the marble floor. Helen began to choke, clutching her throat. Lucy rushed to her, holding her. "What did you give her?" Mary cried. Veronica took a step back, comprehension and horror crossing her face. I just... Lucy picked up the fallen glass, seeing a white residue at the bottom. "Call an ambulance," she cried. "Now!" Mary was already on the phone. Veronica looked around, seeing the accusations on every face, the weight of her actions, finally catching up to her. She ran for the door, pushing furniture out of her way. Lucy heard the sound of rapid footsteps in the corridor, then the roar of an engine. Through the window, she saw a black car stop at the gate, Veronica hastily getting in, and the vehicle disappearing down the street. But Lucy had no time to think about that. Helen was in her arms, pale and trembling, and all that mattered at that moment was keeping her alive, ensuring that all this courage, all this struggle, would not have been in vain, because Helen deserved justice, deserved to see the day when truth would finally triumph over the lies and manipulation that had dominated her life for too long. St. Thomas's Hospital was silent that Friday night. Lucy remained seated on a hard plastic chair in the fifth-floor corridor, still wearing her stained uniform, her hands clasped in her lap. Mary paced back and forth, her cell phone glued to her ear, making urgent calls to solicitors and the police. It was almost 11 at night when the doctor finally emerged from Helen's room. "How is she?" Mary asked, rushing over to him. The doctor, a young man in a white lab coat with a tired expression, sighed. "Stable. We performed a complete gastric lavage. There were very strong sedatives in her system, but we managed to eliminate most of them. She will recover, but needs observation." Lucy felt her legs weaken with relief. "Can I see her?" "You can, but she's sleeping. Better to let her rest." In the following days, the mansion in Belgravia became a hub of frantic activity. Police officers came and went, asking questions, collecting evidence. Mary hired a solicitor specializing in family law and financial fraud, a serious man, named Dr. Richard Silver, who immediately began preparing a civil action against Veronica and Andrew Stone. Helen returned home the following Tuesday, still weak, but with clearer eyes than Lucy had seen in weeks. The first thing she did was hold Lucy's hand and thank her. "You saved me," she said, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "I'll never forget it." Lucy merely squeezed her hand, too emotional to speak. But the calm was deceptive. On Thursday morning, while Lucy was helping Helen have coffee in her room, Mary entered with a large envelope in hand, a troubled expression. "This was left at the gate overnight," she said, placing the envelope on the table. "There's no sender." Lucy watched Mary open the envelope carefully. Inside were several papers and a handwritten letter. Mary began to read aloud, her voice trembling. "To whom it may concern, my name is Andrew Stone, and I write this letter as a confession and an apology. I was coerced by Veronica Davis to participate in a fraudulent scheme, but the truth is larger and darker than I initially knew myself. Veronica was not acting alone. She was taking orders from Edward Thompson, the majority shareholder, of Davis Enterprises, the company founded by the late Robert Davis. Edward planned to appropriate all of the family's assets, using Mrs. Helen's incapacity as legal justification. The money transfers I organized were just the first step. The complete plan would involve declaring Mrs. Helen incapacitated, taking total control of the company, and forcing the sale of assets to shell companies controlled by Edward. Attached are copies of conversations, contracts, and proofs that demonstrate all of this. I ask for forgiveness for my actions and hope this information helps bring justice." The silence that followed was heavy. Helen was pale, her hands trembling over her teacup. "Edward Thompson," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Robert trusted him like a brother. They were partners for 30 years. Mary flipped through the attached documents, her expression growing darker and darker. "It's all here. Fake contracts, transfers to offshore accounts, even a detailed plan of how they would make the company appear to be in crisis to justify the sale." "We need to take this to the police immediately," Lucy said. "I'm already calling," Mary replied, dialing Dr. Richard's number. But before the call completed, there was a loud noise. Coming from the ground floor, glass shattering, staff screaming. Lucy ran to the window and felt her blood run cold. There was a black car parked in front of the mansion, the same one she had seen Veronica get into on Friday. 2 figures were getting out of it, large men dressed in dark suits. "Mary," Lucy said, trying to keep her voice calm, We need to call the police now. Mary looked out the window and paled. She locked the bedroom door and called emergency services, speaking rapidly. Lucy could hear heavy footsteps coming up the stairs, harsh male. Voices asking threatening questions to the staff. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. They remained locked in the room for 20 minutes that felt like hours. Finally, they heard sirens. The heavy footsteps rushed away, the car engine roaring as it departed. When the police arrived, the men had already fled. But they left a clear message, a note on the meeting room table that simply read, "Return the documents, or there will be consequences." That night, police officers stood guard at the mansion. Dr. Richard came personally to collect all the documents and take them to the Crown Prosecution Service. He explained that the case now involved not only civil fraud, but also threats and intimidation. "You need to be very careful," he warned. "Edward Thompson is extremely powerful. He has contacts everywhere. Don't underestimate what he's capable of." The next day, Friday, Lucy discovered exactly how powerful the enemies they faced were. As she left the mansion at the end of her shift, she realized she was being followed. A grey car maintained a constant distance behind the bus she took. When she got off at the stop near her house, the car also stopped. Lucy walked, quickly, her heart pounding. She turned one corner, then another, trying to lose whoever was following her. Finally, she ran to a neighbor's house and desperately knocked on the door. "Mrs. Celia, please help me." The neighbor, an elderly lady who had known Lucy for years, didn't hesitate to let her in. Lucy told her everything, and Mrs. Celia called the police. When the police arrived, the grey car had already left, but the message was clear. Lucy wasn't safe. No one was. Mary insisted that Lucy and her children stay at the mansion for a few days, in one of the guest rooms. Lucy hesitated, feeling she had already gotten too involved, but Mary was firm. "You're in this with us now, and I'll protect you, just as you protected my grandmother." On Saturday morning, another unexpected development. A young man appeared at the mansion, a fellow of about 25 with disheveled hair and red eyes from lack of sleep. It was Brian, the son of a deceased cousin of Robert's, and technically the family's closest male heir. "I need to speak with you," he said, his voice broken with guilt and despair. Sitting in the living room with Mary, Helen, Lucy, and Dr. Richard present, Brian confessed something terrible. "It was me. Unintentionally, but it was me. 6 months ago, Veronica approached me. She said she needed help updating the company's security systems, that there were threats of digital intrusion. She asked for my passwords, my access codes. I, like an idiot, gave her everything. I thought I was helping the family." He buried his face in his hands. "I only realized what I had done when I saw the news about the fraud. Veronica used my access to transfer money, alter documents, hide transactions. It was all my fault." Mary approached him. "Brian, you were deceived. She manipulated you." But Brian shook his head. "I should have been suspicious. I should have checked. Because of me, the family almost lost everything." Helen, sitting in her armchair, looked at the young man with compassion. "What matters now is that we fix this together." Dr. Richard made careful notes. "This testimony is crucial. It shows premeditation and systematic manipulation. I will include this in the action." But as they spoke, Mary's cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. She answered with hesitation. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was feminine and distorted, clearly using some device to modify it. "Go to the gate. There's something you need to see." The call was cut off. Mary looked at the others, confused and apprehensive. Dr. Richard accompanied Mary to the gate, with 2 police guards nearby. Lucy stayed with Helen but watched everything from the window. Mary returned carrying a small box. Inside it, wrapped in plastic, was a digital memory stick, a red USB drive. They took it to the office and connected the memory stick to Mary's computer. What they saw left them speechless. They were videos, dozens of them, recordings of Veronica and Edward Thompson in secret meetings, discussing every detail of the plan. Edward talking about specific values, bank accounts in tax havens, strategies to avoid investigation. Veronica reporting on the progress of incapacitating Helen. There was even a video of her rehearsing Helen's signature, practicing forgery. "This is more than enough," said Dr. Richard, his voice vibrating with professional satisfaction. "With this evidence, we can not only prosecute civilly, but ensure they answer in the appropriate legal sphere." But as everyone watched the videos, Lucy couldn't stop thinking, who had left that there? Who, within that web of conspiracy, had decided to betray the others? And if that person was truly an ally, or just another piece in a game even more dangerous and complex than any of them could imagine? The Crown Prosecution Service headquarters in London occupied an austere building in the city centre, its grey walls and cold corridors conveying the seriousness of the work carried out there. On Monday morning, Dr. Richard, Mary and Lucy were summoned for an urgent meeting with the prosecutor responsible for the case, Ms. Patricia Drummond, a 50-year-old woman with grey hair pulled back in, a bun and penetrating eyes that seemed to evaluate every word spoken. She examined all the documents and videos for almost 2 hours before speaking. "What we have here is sufficient to prosecute Veronica Davis and Edward Thompson on multiple charges," she said finally, her voice grave and measured. "Fraud, document manipulation, abuse of a vulnerable person, illegal transfers. I will request search and seizure warrants for both of their properties, as well as the freezing of all involved bank accounts." She paused, her gaze fixing on Lucy. "I need to warn you, however, Edward Thompson is not a common target. He has considerable resources, influential political contacts, and as you've already seen, he doesn't hesitate to use intimidation. You need to be extremely cautious." Mary nodded, but her expression was determined. "We will do whatever is necessary to protect my grandmother and recover what is ours." That afternoon, back at the mansion, the tension was palpable. Police officers continued to stand guard, but everyone knew it wouldn't be enough if Edward truly decided to act. That night, the mansion's phone rang. Mary answered, putting it on speakerphone. "Hello?" Veronica's voice sounded on the other end, tense and urgent. "Mary, I need to speak with you alone. I won't meet you alone. You tried to harm my grandmother. Listen to me." There was a pause, and when Veronica spoke again, there was something different in her voice, something that sounded like genuine desperation. "I made terrible mistakes, I know that, but you don't understand the danger everyone is in. Edward is far more dangerous than you imagine. He has people everywhere, police, judiciary, even in the Crown Prosecution Service." "How can we trust you?" Mary asked, skeptical. "Because I'm also on the run now. I thought I was his partner, but I realized I'm just another disposable tool. He has plans to get rid of me as soon as I'm no longer useful. I want to make a deal. I'll hand over everything I know about Edward, all the evidence he doesn't know I have, in exchange for protection." Lucy, listening to everything, felt a mixture of anger and distrust. This woman had tried to destroy Helen, and now she wanted help. "What kind of evidence?" asked Dr. Richard, who was also present. "Everything. Offshore accounts, secret partners, politicians he bribes, shell companies. I have recordings of conversations where he admits to having eliminated previous obstacles." Veronica hesitated. "I'm afraid of what he'll do to me when he finds out you have evidence against him." "Where are you?" Mary asked. "In a safe place for now. But I'll only deliver the evidence in person, and only to her." Veronica's voice indicated Lucy. "She's the only one I can trust who has no ulterior motives." Everyone looked at Lucy, who felt the weight of responsibility fall upon her again. "It's a trap," Dr. Richard said immediately. "Too obvious." "Perhaps," Lucy agreed. "But what if it isn't? What if she really has proof that can finish Edward for good?" She spent the next night planning. Dr. Richard insisted on involving the police, but Veronica had made it clear she wouldn't show up if there was a police presence. Finally, they reached a compromise. Lucy would go, but she would carry a tracking device and a hidden communicator. Undercover police officers would be nearby, ready to intervene at the first sign of danger. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon, in a bustling square in Chinatown, where the crowd would provide both security and camouflage. Lucy arrived 20 minutes before the agreed time. She sat on a bench near the central fountain, pretending to read a newspaper, while her eyes constantly scanned her surroundings. Her heart beat rapidly, her hands sweating. At 3 o'clock sharp, she saw Veronica. The woman was unrecognizable. Dark hair, now blonde and short, dark sunglasses covering half her face, simple clothes completely different from her usual elegance. She sat down beside Lucy, not looking directly at her. "Did you bring what I asked for?" Veronica asked, her voice low. Lucy had brought a false copy of the evidence on a digital memory stick, as Dr. Richard had suggested. The real one was in a safe place. "I did. And your proof?" Veronica opened her bag slightly, letting Lucy see another USB drive. "Everything is here. Accounts, names, dates, recordings. Enough to completely destroy Edward." "Why are you doing this now?" Lucy asked. "Why the sudden change?" Veronica took a deep breath. "Because I realized I was being used. Edward never intended to give me what he promised. I found emails, conversations where he laughs at me, calls me a useful idiot." She laughed bitterly. The irony is he was right. Before Lucy could respond, she saw sudden movement. Two men in suits were approaching rapidly from the left. Veronica saw them too and turned pale. "It's a trap. Edward found me." She stood up and ran. Lucy, by instinct, ran after her, shouting into the hidden communicator that Edward had sent men. The chase swept through the crowded square. People screamed, moving away. Lucy saw the undercover police officers also running, trying to intercept Edward's men. Veronica turned down a side street, Lucy following her. Pedestrians moved away, startled. Lucy could hear the heavy footsteps of the men behind them. Veronica cut through a municipal market, knocking over stalls, creating obstacles. Lucy jumped over fruit crates, slipped on something wet, almost fell but recovered. They exited the market onto another street where traffic was congested. Veronica ran between the stopped cars, horns blaring furiously. Lucy followed her, her heart feeling like it was about to explode. Finally, in a narrow alley, Veronica stopped, out of breath, cornered by a tall fence. Edward's men appeared at the alley's entrance, blocking the exit, but then sirens cut through the air. Police cars surrounded the area. Edward's men recoiled, but not before one of them managed to snatch Veronica's bag and flee running. "No!" Veronica cried. "The evidence!" Lucy saw the man disappear into a side alley. The police tried to follow him, but he was fast. He knew the streets. When they finally managed to escort Lucy and Veronica to a safe location, a nearby police station, Veronica was in shock. "I lost everything. He has the evidence now." Dr. Richard, who had arrived shortly after, tried to console her. "We still have what you told us, your testimony." But Veronica shook her head. "Edward will destroy everything now. He'll eliminate evidence, bribe witnesses. You don't understand the power he has." Lucy, still processing everything that had happened, suddenly remembered something. When the police were taking Veronica from the patrol car, she had dropped her coat on the ground. Lucy had instinctively picked it up. She opened the coat and checked the pockets. In one of them, hidden in a sewn internal compartment, she found something. Another USB drive. Veronica looked at it, surprised. "I had forgotten. I made 2 copies. One in the bag, obvious, another hidden in case something went wrong." Dr. Richard took the USB drive with careful hands. They immediately took it to the Crown Prosecution Service. What they found there exceeded all expectations. It wasn't just financial documents. There were recordings of Edward openly admitting he had manipulated judicial processes by bribing judges. Videos of him in night meetings with corrupt businessmen discussing bribes and fraud in public tenders. Emails detailing a secret fund used to finance political campaigns in exchange for favors. There was even a phone recording where Edward instructed Veronica on how to increase Helen's medication dosage, stating verbatim that if the old woman didn't survive the process, it would be better because it would simplify everything. Ms. Patricia Drummond, upon seeing all of that, turned pale. "This goes beyond family fraud. We're talking about large-scale corruption involving important public figures." The next few days were a whirlwind. The Crown Prosecution Service worked day and night preparing charges. The press began to sniff out the story, speculative headlines appearing in the newspapers. At the mansion, Helen was being kept under constant protection. Mary didn't leave her side. Brian, consumed by guilt but determined to help, offered full testimony and made himself available to collaborate on everything. And Lucy, the simple caregiver who merely wanted a stable job to support her children, found herself at the center of a scandal that threatened to bring down powerful people, aware that the next steps would be even more dangerous, because men like Edward Thompson did not fall without a fight, and the approaching war would test the courage of all of them in ways they could barely imagine in that tense and uncertain moment. The operation was planned with surgical precision. Ms. Patricia Drummond coordinated with the National Crime Agency, recognizing that the scope of Edward Thompson's corruption required resources beyond state capacity. A special team was assembled, including agents experienced in high-risk operations. The fire plan was risky. Edward needed to be caught red-handed, preferably committing another act that proved his intentions. The idea came from Veronica, who was now fully cooperating in exchange for a reduction of her own charges. "Edward believes you still only have part of the evidence," she explained in a tense meeting at the Crown Prosecution Service. "He will want to completely eliminate any remaining evidence, and for that, he will need to act personally this time." "And how do we make him show up?" asked Dr. Richard. Veronica looked at Lucy. "We let it leak that the caregiver has the original memory stick hidden somewhere, that she's the only one who knows where it is. Edward won't resist the opportunity to get rid of her and the evidence all at once." Lucy felt a chill run down her spine. "You want to use me as bait?" "It's the only way," said Ms. Patricia. "But we will ensure your complete protection. Teams at all points, constant communication, surveillance drones. You will never truly be alone." Mary immediately protested. "We can't ask her to do that. She's already risked too much." But Lucy interrupted. "I'll do it. If this means ensuring Helen is safe forever, that Edward pays for what he's done and that other families don't suffer what this one has, I'll do it." Helen, present at the meeting in a wheelchair, held Lucy's hand. "You are the bravest person I've ever met." The operation was scheduled for Friday night. The chosen location was an old disused factory in the industrial area of Dagenham, a complex of abandoned warehouses that offered multiple entry and exit points, perfect for the police ambush, but also dangerously difficult to completely control. Lucy arrived at the location at 9 in the evening, driving a borrowed car. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. She knew that NCA agents were positioned in every corner, but the solitude of the place was terrifying. Deteriorated concrete buildings, broken windows, weeds growing between cracks in the asphalt. She parked near the main warehouse and got out of the car, holding a small bag that supposedly contained the digital memory stick. In reality, it contained only an empty memory stick and a tracking device. As she walked towards the warehouse, Lucy saw movement in the shadows, figures emerging from the darkness. Her instinct screamed to run, but she forced herself to remain steady. Edward Thompson appeared first. He was a tall man, about 60, with perfectly combed white hair, an expensive suit even in that degraded setting. His eyes were cold, calculating, completely devoid of empathy. "So you're the famous caregiver," he said, his voice soft but with a threatening undertone. "The little heroine who thinks she can bring down empires." "I just want justice for Mrs. Helen." Edward laughed. "Justice? What a charmingly naive concept." He walked closer. "Let me explain how the world really works, my dear. People like me build things. We create jobs, we move the economy. And sometimes to do that we need to make difficult decisions. Helen was an obstacle. Old, weak, stuck in sentimentalisms that hindered progress." "So you decided to steal everything from her," Lucy said, recording every word through the hidden device. "Stealing is such an ugly word. I prefer reallocation of resources to more competent hands." Edward extended his hand. "Now, the memory stick, please." Lucy took a step back. "And what if I don't hand it over?" Edward made a sign and more men emerged from the shadows, 4 of them all large, clearly armed. "Then there will be unpleasant consequences. For you and for your family. You have 3 children, don't you? Mark, 16, Anna, 13, and little Luke, 9. It would be a shame if something happened to them." Lucy's blood ran cold upon hearing her children's names. "Control yourself," she thought. "The police are here. Just a few more minutes." "You won't lay a hand on them," she said, her voice trembling but firm. At that moment, bright lights flashed on from all sides. Sirens cut through the night. National Crime Agency cars surrounded the warehouse from multiple directions. Edward was paralyzed for a second, then spun around looking for an exit. His men drew weapons, but amplified voices ordered them to drop them on the ground. "National Crime Agency, you are surrounded. Drop your weapons and lie on the ground." One of Edward's men grabbed Lucy, using her as a shield. She felt the cold metal of a gun against her ribs and closed her eyes, praying silently. But then a figure emerged running from one of the side buildings. It was Brian, who had insisted on participating in the operation as a form of redemption. He tackled the man holding Lucy, knocking him down. Lucy fell to the side, scraping her knee on the rough concrete. NCA agents stormed the location. There was a moment of chaos, shouts, rapid movements. Edward tried to run, but was intercepted by 2 agents who tackled him to the ground and handcuffed him. "You don't know who you're messing with," Edward shouted. "I have contacts, solicitors. I'll be out of this in 24 hours. "Not this time," said Miss Patricia Drummond, emerging from the shadows. "We have irrefutable evidence of corruption, fraud, judicial manipulation and conspiracy, and we have your own testimony admitting everything, recorded just minutes ago." Edward's expression changed, comprehension and fury crossing his face. As Edward was being placed in a patrol car, another car arrived. From it stepped Veronica, escorted by police officers. She had agreed to appear as part of her plea bargain. Helen was also there, having insisted on witnessing the outcome personally. From her wheelchair, she faced Veronica for the first time since the attempted poisoning. "Why?" Helen asked, her voice broken. "Why would you do this?" Veronica lowered her eyes, unable to meet the elderly woman's gaze. "Greed, ambition, envy. Choose what you prefer. All the answers are true." She hesitated. "I deeply regret it. I know that means nothing now, but I regret it." Helen merely shook her head, tears streaming. "You destroyed this family." "No," Mary said, approaching and placing her hand on her grandmother's shoulder. "She tried to destroy it, but she didn't succeed because we had brave people who fought for the truth." She looked at Lucy with gratitude. In the following days, the story exploded across all media. Newspapers ran headlines about the biggest corporate corruption scandal of the year. Edward Thompson and Veronica Davis arrested. Dozens of politicians and businessmen under investigation. Accounts frozen, search warrants executed in law firms and shell companies. Andrew Stone, the solicitor, received a reduced sentence for his cooperation. Veronica would face years answering for her actions, though her plea bargain had ensured some leniency. Edward, refusing to cooperate and with the arrogance of believing his power would protect him, found himself abandoned by allies who realized that associating with him now was toxic. A month later, on a sunny June afternoon, Lucy was called to Helen's private office in the mansion. The elderly woman, now regaining strength with proper treatment and correct medication, sat behind the mahogany desk that had once belonged to her late son. "Sit down, Lucy," Helen said, smiling. Lucy obeyed, still uncomfortable with formalities. "You saved my life," Helen began. "More than that, you saved my dignity, my assets, and the future of my family. I can never fully repay you, but I want to try." She pushed some documents across the table. "This is the deed to a house in a secure, gated community in Richmond. 3 bedrooms, garden, garage. It's yours, free of any encumbrance. I have also established an educational fund for your 3 children. Mark, Anna, and Luke will have their complete education guaranteed, including university." Lucy felt tears well up in her eyes. "Mrs. Helen, I can't accept this." "You can and you will," Helen said firmly. "Furthermore, I want to offer you a permanent position. Not as a caregiver, though I'd love for you to continue keeping me company, but as the administrative manager of this property, someone I completely trust to look after the family's interests." Mary, standing beside her grandmother, nodded. "We need people of integrity, Lucy, people who put what is right above what is convenient." Lucy couldn't speak. She just cried years of effort, of struggle, of nights wondering how she would pay the bills, all culminating in that moment of recognition and reward. When she finally managed to gather her words, she simply said, "Thank you. Thank you for trusting me." "It is we who thank you," Helen said, "for reminding us that goodness exists in the world, that courage doesn't come from power or money, but from character." Lucy left the mansion that day, carrying much more than documents and promises. She carried the certainty that she had made a difference, that a simple person with limited resources, but a determined heart, could confront corruption and win. That truth, when defended with unwavering courage, had the power to bring down the most powerful empires built on lies. And that sometimes, when all seems lost, an unexpected light emerges to illuminate the path, showing that justice and goodness still exist, just waiting for someone brave enough to fight for them. The mansion, finally free from the shadows that haunted it, breathed peace again. Helen, surrounded by Mary's love and Lucy's loyalty, knew that her family, though wounded, would survive and prosper. And Lucy understood that she had never been just an employee, but the pillar that prevented everything from collapsing. The unlikely heroine whose simple courage had not only saved a family, but restored faith in the possibility that good can triumph over evil. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Lucy Miller and Helen Davis has deeply touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey full of twists and turns, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating and inspiring stories. Find it by clicking here on the left side of your screen. If this narrative of courage, justice, and redemption moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your precious like on this video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life, the strength of human character, and the eternal struggle between good and evil. Don't miss our upcoming content. We want to know what you thought of this story, so we await you in the comments, sharing your reflections, emotions, and which moments most marked you on this journey alongside Lucy. Until the next story.